Welcome to another edition of the PhinManiacs.com podcast. I am your host, Louis Sung, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Chad Tannenbaum, and from Unsquish the Fish podcast, Ron Caniff is here, and later on, I'm sure we'll have Keith Beebe. So we'll have some really knowledgeable people here to go along with me. So first up on the block today is that we're going to discuss what the team should do with the 13th overall pick. There's been a lot of talk about the cornerbacks and the running backs, but somebody asked me today or the other day, what about offensive line players at that spot? So we'll discuss possibilities at number 13 overall on the offensive line. Then we're going to discuss what the team's biggest need is currently, since half of free agency is pretty much over. What now that the Dolphins have filled a few holes, what is still the biggest need so far, and what should the Dolphins do about it? And also, finally, we're going to discuss the whole visit of Arian Foster, well-known running back, veteran back, and a very boom or bust individual, since if he's hurt, he does nothing. If he's not hurt, he does amazing things. So we'll discuss that whole strategy that the Dolphins seem to be bringing out, this whole idea of this player is either going to be really great or he's going to do absolutely nothing. So, and also, I should also point out that if you want to call the show, you can call in at 1-954-376-5704, or you can tweet the show at PhinManiacs. We're taking callers this evening, and as always, we'll be willing to discuss whatever you want to talk about, as long as it has something to do with football or the Dolphins. Please do not call in about Batman versus Superman or fantasy baseball, Matthew Canada. So, anyway, now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started with the whole draft prospect situation. The Miami Dolphins have the 13th overall pick after the trade with the Eagles, dropped them back 5 spots. And there's a lot of options: cornerback, running back. We've been hearing about Ezekiel Elliott a lot. We've been hearing about Vernon Hargreaves, Mackenzie Alexander, Eli Apple, even Reggie Ragland for linebacker. But the other day, I was asked, what about offensive line spots? And of course, there's always the option of somebody like Jack Conklin or maybe a Cody Whitehair if we really want to take care of the guard position once and for all. But I'm going to ask you guys first, who do you think would be a good spot for 13th overall if we're just going to talk offensive line? And then I'm going to ask you, what do you think the Dolphins should do? So first, offensive line, and I'm going to start with you, Chad.
You're asking me if they're taking one at 13, who I would take, you mean?
Yeah.
I'm not for it, so that's a tough one. But I know this is Keith's guy, but I would probably go with Conklin if I had to use that pick. But they don't desperately need an offensive tackle; they need more of a guard, and I just don't like taking guards in the first round. The only guy I would take if he were there, regardless, if I was going best player available, would be if somehow Ronnie Stanley from Notre Dame fell. I think he's going to be a real solid pro. And so if he somehow fell, which is a possibility, I mean, he's not necessarily going to go before 13, especially with what's going on with the quarterbacks. I'm starting to begin to think stronger and stronger that the quarterbacks are going to go higher than people are anticipating, especially after like the pro day. I don't know. I just think there's going to be 2, maybe all 3 of them are going to go by the 13th pick, and I think that may push somebody like a Ronnie Stanley down. So I would take Ronnie Stanley with 13. If they had a desperate need for tackle, I'd be okay taking Jack Conklin. But I mean, if you do draft him, I don't think he projects. Let me look here. He's 6'5". I'm not a big fan of really tall guards. That's what we have been doing with Billy Turner and these guys, where you try to take them from a tackle to a guard. I like guards to be a little bit more short in the middle, so your quarterback one can see over him easier, and I feel like the lower center of gravity helps them on run blocking. But anyway, that's kind of a long, convoluted answer. But my first pick would be Ronnie Stanley, no brainer if he's there. If they decided they really wanted a tackle, I'd go Jack Conklin.
How about you, Ron?
If they're gonna just go ahead and make up their mind and take O-line, which I'm not a proponent of right now, again, unless Stanley's there, I would be fine with Conklin or even Taylor Decker. But I really think that they need to start looking at who's the next left tackle that Ryan Tannehill can grow with, because I really don't feel, who we have now is going to be there much longer. Just getting old and, always with the injuries. So I would be fine with them going that route if they really feel like that's the best on their board. I just feel like I'd prefer them to look at the defense, especially in this draft, or maybe Ezekiel Elliott if they think he's special.
But that was the discussion asked because they were always hearing about, oh, we need cornerbacks, oh, we need running backs. But I guess the mentality that this person had was that is exactly what you brought up, somebody who can grow with Ryan Tannehill and become the left tackle of the future. Like Brandon Albert won't be there much longer, and there's concern about his injury. So like Conklin would fit that bill. He was a really good for Michigan State. So
yeah, I want to see them if they're going to do it. Then let's go with a left tackle that you really love. And I wouldn't even try and force him in the guard spot. Honestly, it's just my opinion. Let's let him play left tackle. And I would rather force Albert into the guard spot, make him play guard. I know that's not what he wants to do, but I don't know how much longer Albert might have. Another year on this team? If you're talking about drafting a first round left tackle, you're talking about a guy you're hoping will be around for hopefully at least 4 or 5 years, and maybe even longer if you can get him into a second contract. So what's more important there?
Do you think that we could possibly, if we did do the Conklin thing, do you think there would be a team out there who could possibly use Albert? So if we could trade him?
I guess it depends on how much money they're going to have to pay versus what we're paying. And I don't really know that I have the answer to that. I'm sure obviously that answer exists. I just don't personally know it off the top of my head. It's always possible. If a team really felt like maybe especially if you got an injury during training camp, that does tend to happen sometimes. And one of the more contending teams said, "Oh no, our left tackle's out for the year."
You find somebody to trade for him, but his contract's pretty high. So I don't. The higher the player's contract, the less you're going to get return in picks because you're not giving that much value to the next team that's getting him because he's older, he's getting paid a lot. So the incentive for them to give up draft picks, which now that the rookie salary cap's in place, draft picks are gold. You don't like to give them up, and so I don't think it'd be. And for the Dolphins, they paid the big bonus out to Brandon Alberts, which is prorated over his contract. And so if they were to trade him, I'm pretty sure if you do that, then you got to absorb that hit immediately. And so it'd have to be a post-June trade, and they would still take a pretty big cap hit over trading him off because I want to say he has 2 years at least left on a deal. And so you just immediately have to pay all his bonus out. So, or take that hit on your cap for the bonus you paid him, I should say. So I don't think trading him is very realistic. I agree with what Ron's saying. They absolutely have a need for a franchise left tackle that's going to be the replacement for Brandon Alberts, but that's got to be what you see that guy. And I don't know that if you're looking at addressing it next year, is Jack Conklin special? And that's the way I would look at it, because if you're going to draft a guy that you don't necessarily need, he needs to be pretty special. And Miami's kind of got burned on that because Deion Jordan was supposed to be pretty special, and they drafted him when they didn't need him, and they ended up getting burned on it. And you could argue that they drafted Devontae Parker, and they didn't really need him. I mean, not that I don't like Devontae Parker. I think he's going to be good, but the reality is they hardly even used him last year in combination with the injury and the Greg Jennings move, which it's still curious to me. I don't understand why they ended up taking Greg Jennings and they take the dead money hit and then they turn right around and drafted Devontae Parker. And so I think after a couple of years of those picks where, that they were based on the guy being good but not necessarily needing him, tends to make me think this year Miami's just going to I think we're just going to push the left tackle to next year, and in 2017 we're probably going to maybe be looking at bringing in another big free agent, or we're going to be using a high pick on a tackle next year. But I guess it all depends on where they rank a guy like Jack Conklin. But I personally don't see him being special enough to bring in and put him in the lineup where that's not a glaring hole. Stanley, I should say, not Staley, forgive me, Ron Stanley from Notre Dame. I would think about that. I think he's special enough that you feel pretty confident he can be our long-term offensive tackle. So I think they might make the move with him. But Conklin, to me, it seems more like a guy that could come in, be a solid starter, but he doesn't scream like a guy that's going to be an obvious Pro Bowl left tackle for the next decade.
Lewis, I've got some numbers here, actually some real numbers on Albert in a trade scenario if you'd like to hear them.
Okay, sure, go for it.
Yeah, pretty much what Ronenbaum's saying, Chad's saying is right on. I don't think there would be a chance in heck that he would get traded this year. It would be a $5 million savings, but a $5 million dead money. $5 million in dead money if they traded him this year. 3.4 if they traded him next year, but it'd be 7.2 in savings. And then if they trade him in 2018, which his contract is all the way through 2018, it'd be only 1.7 in dead and 9.6 in savings. So you could look at something like that maybe happening after next year, but this year I think if you consider a $5 million dead money, no, I don't see that happening.
Yeah, but the thing is that you have to picture what kind of a return could you get from him draft picks. Now I realize what Chad was saying is that like the higher the price is for the player, you're not going to get as much in return because the team receiving the player does not want to wind up paying $1 bazillion for the player they're getting and also giving up draft picks because draft picks are gold. So, but if Brandon Albert, like it or not, is still a very, very good left tackle, and if he's healthy, he can help a contender get over that hump. Somebody like Carolina, who, like, we all know their offensive line. Like, I think their offensive line was one of the worst in football last year, and there are a lot of other teams. Let me just see if I can. I'm going to see if I can pull up. Did Pro Football Focus already shut down the whole ranking system, or is that still there? I'm honestly not sure anymore.
Not sure. I never look at Pro Football Focus. So I don't know.
Well, it's decent enough to find like overall rankings of offensive lines, but I know for a fact that the Panthers did not have a very good offensive line, and then there was the whole. I think it was what was it that was it Cian Fahey on Twitter. I don't know how you say his name, so he said like who was it the quarterbacks that got beat up on the most without actually having it being their fault. It was Tannehill, Blake Bortles, and somebody else. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Matt Stafford. So you take that into account, and you can imagine that any of those teams would gladly take somebody like and the Jaguars in particular, because the Jaguars, like, money is like not even an object for them. So it's not like they would be dealing with too much if they wanted to get their hands on Brandon Albert, because Brandon Albert would immediately gives a serious boost to that offensive line and give them a chance to, if they really feel like they're ready to compete, which I would hope they are after all this time saving up cap space, doing their drafting and all this free, and now punching in free agency. I would hope that they're thinking that it's time to compete if they really believe in Blake Bortles. So with that in mind, you could potentially get something from the Jaguars for Brandon Albert. And mind you, this is all Madden style speculation that probably won't even happen to begin with. But if I had to pick a partner to trade Brandon Albert, I would say that based on what Cian Fahey said about with his QB charts, with Bortles being beat on all this time, and then you have all the money that they have in spares. So if you thought about that, then maybe you could try and convince the Jaguars that, look, Albert could get you over the hump and bring you some depth, if nothing else. So maybe we can get a 4th or a 5th rounder from you, because Albert is still, like I said, a really, really good left tackle when he's healthy.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the only reason they would do that, Lewis, is if they were literally just saying we're going to do a rebuild this year. 4th round pick to get rid of a starting left tackle. It's a pretty small return, and I mean he's also a locker room leader.
But that's assuming that Conklin is coming.
Well, that's what I mean, though. But if you make that move, so if you use your 1st round pick to take an offensive tackle and then trade Brandon Alberts out, for a mid-round pick, then you've essentially not improved your team dramatically. I don't see Jack Conklin as a rookie being a big upgrade over Brandon Albert, and so rather than addressing an area of need where the team has to get an upgrade in talent, probably a cornerback or a running back, you're just swapping out your and 16. I think it would do nothing to help your chances of winning this coming season. That would be a long-term move. So I don't think Miami is in rebuild mode, and that would be a complete rebuild move, in my opinion, to make a move like that.
Okay, well, just just gonna address that real quick. What you just said. If the Dolphins are not in rebuild mode, then I have a serious problem with what they've done this offseason. If they are in rebuild mode, which I personally think that they are, they'll never admit it because the Dolphins have an ego, and so does Stephen Ross, and that's fine. If you want to have an ego, that's fine. I can't blame the man for wanting to think that he has a good team, because of course he's a businessman, a mogul. He's one of he's one of the richest owners in the NFL, and he wants to win. He like people think he doesn't care. Like, no, I'll show you an owner who doesn't care. Jeffrey Lurie of the Marlins, he doesn't care. Ross cares. Ross cares a lot. He just doesn't know who to trust. So, and anyway, so I'm not. That's my pro Stephen Ross moment of the day. But I look at it like I would hope that this Dolphins team realizes that they have some serious, at least if nothing else, retooling to do. Because if this is their idea of we're going to win now, then I seriously have issues with what they've done so far, because they haven't signed the cornerbacks that could have helped them. So right now they have no corners. They could have signed a linebacker. They didn't do that. They got Kiko Alonso and Byron Maxwell in the trade, which is fine and dandy if they work out. And I would hope Alonso works out more than anything else, because he has the most potential to actually be something special. And then you have Mario Williams to take over for Olivier Vernon, which is good for temporary, but not something you want to deal with long term. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. And then you have Cameron Wake, who's getting older. This team is not going to be, even if they do find a way to play it off that they made upgrades, it won't last long, because a lot of their star players are getting older, and that's going to be a problem moving forward. So I would hope that even if they're not announcing it to the public, that the Dolphins have this idea of, yeah, we are rebuilding. We're just not going to admit it because Stephen Ross doesn't want to hear it. So
no team admits, no NFL owner, GM, or coach ever comes out to the public and says, we are rebuilding. I've heard other people say what you're saying, and they say, oh, the Dolphins don't want to admit it. 32 NFL owners, GMs, coaches, and staff do not ever admit that they are going to come out and just say, we are rebuilding. That just doesn't happen. So it doesn't mean they're not. No one's going to say that.
I'm sure that if we looked around long enough, we'd find somebody that said, yeah, we're rebuilding, but I'm not going to go look for that.
I would imagine some idiot assistant secondary coach sometimes said that. Like the same guy that said, look, Johnny Manziel really wants to be here, man. Look at this text. Some moron like that. Yeah, perhaps. But nobody with any sense in their head says that, because no fan base ever really, in general, wants to hear that. Even if they know in their heart of hearts it's the best thing to do, like it probably is for the Dolphins.
Yeah, well, and then that's the point that I wanted to make with Albert. I mean, even if Albert is a rebuilding move, I wouldn't have a problem with it. Like, assuming we do get Conklin. Like, if Conklin is the move, or Stanley or whoever's there, then I would not have a problem with moving on from Albert. Like, even if it's like a minimal pick, like a fifth or a sixth or a seventh, every pick counts, especially if you're going into a rebuilding mode. Because look what the Dolphins are doing. Look at the approach they're taking. I know Tom Shannon at Bearing the News, he writes for our website. He's saying that compensatory picks should be a consolation prize, not a goal in mind. And that's sound logic. However, if you have this mentality of we are rebuilding and we're trying to build through the draft, which is something that Dolphins fans have been begging, pleading, saying, please stop buying every free agent on the market, and then they proceed to yell and scream when they don't. But I digress. The Dolphins are finally seeming to try to want to build through the draft. They're trying to get as many draft picks as they can, accumulate what they can get their hands on. The Dolphins right now, I believe they have just talking right now. And I think these are the confirmed picks. Alan Pupar for the Miami Dolphins tweeted this out earlier today, and I think this is what the official number is right now. Like, these are the picks they have right now. They're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 2 sevenths. One of them was for when they traded Will Davis to the Baltimore Ravens.
Mm-hmm. So that's what they have this year.
Or was it a trade? I think it was a trade. They traded him to the Ravens. Yeah, okay. So they traded Will Davis to the Ravens. So they have one of each, and then they have 2 sevenths. So, and that I don't think that factors in the third rounder from Olivier Vernon and the fifth rounder from Lamar Miller. So right now, what the Dolphins have is 8 draft picks just officially, and then 2 more for the compensatory ones.
Well, the compensatory won't be till next year, though, Lewis. Till
Oh, that's right.
2017.
That's right. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but they still want to save those because I think part of it, honestly, is the fact that number one, I think the organization feels super confident in Gase, and they want to really build for this guy for the future. They don't want to just do a quick fix. Let's try and win now, like when we had Philbin. But I think also they know that if Tannehill does work out, and they are going to keep going with Tannehill, between Tannehill and Sue here in a few years, those two guys are going to eat up huge amounts of salary cap. So you need lots of good, young, cheap talent, which means you need more drafted players and less free agents filling your team in order to make up the difference. And that's part of also why, if they're looking at it strategically years down the road, they need more draft picks because they need more players that can hopefully play and play well that are less expensive. And I think the combination of those two things, plus wanting to do it perhaps the right way, I think those are all the reasons why they're valuing those compensatory picks so much and trying so hard not to sign a guy right now for a year or two to risk losing one of those picks because they need them.
I think along with that too, Ron. Yeah, I agree that it's not that they don't want to get free agents; it's they don't have the luxury anymore to make the mistakes. And I think it's a change in philosophy versus a rebuild, because the reality is this team has made the big splashes. They have gotten Ndamukong Suh, they have got Mike Wallace, and they still haven't made the playoffs since 2008. And this year, I think, was a more difficult year that made them maybe understand that even more so, because if you don't pay the money out that you paid to, say, Bryce McCain and Greg Jennings last year, when they brought those free agents in, then they have the amount of money to just keep Lamar Miller. And now instead of having Lamar Miller, we really had a difficulty overpaying him in the market because we didn't spend the money earlier to sign him in so we could sign guys like Bryce McCain and Greg Jennings. And I think what they're realizing is that you just can't get anywhere in this league. You don't ever get away from mediocre when you spend all your money in free agents, bringing in mediocre free agents. And there wasn't anybody out there in this free agent class that I felt like this guy is something you've got to get him. He's special. The potential guys kind of got locked up. There were a couple of D-backs, but they ended up getting locked up. And I don't think, bringing in somebody like Pac-Man Jones, I don't think he's going to put you over the hump, if you sign guys like that. And so I think what they're probably thinking is, with Ndamukong Suh and with Ryan Tannehill and those contracts, we want to keep those guys as long-term fixtures of the team. They're committed to doing that and paying them. Well, we're going to have to, at some point, probably after the 2016 season going into 2017, we got to think about maybe signing Jarvis Landry, a year before his contract's up, to maybe a reasonable deal where he's making a lot more money, but you don't want to let him get to the open market like you did Lamar Miller or Olivier Vernon. And so I think the idea is let's keep our compensation picks. We'll bring in some younger players in the following draft, and we'll have the money available to keep Jarvis Landry on the team. And you start to wonder which is the best way to get your team better. How do you start getting better and better every year? And so I that's what I really think it's about. I think the team decided we're not going to waste our, which become precious cap space now with the contracts we have in place, on mediocre players. You can't afford to overpay for mediocre players anymore.
And mediocre is essentially what is pretty much out there right now. But I want to bring up, we have on the official YouTube live stream chat, Fins Up Nation asking why not get Luis Vasquez from Denver. He's a veteran guard. He was cut. He was cut on March, I believe it was March 8th by the Denver Broncos. He's a veteran guard. He's available. He wouldn't count against the Dolphins' compensatory picks because he doesn't, as a cut, he doesn't mess up that formula. So, what would you guys be willing to do for somebody like Vasquez?
I'd be absolutely open to bring him. It all depends what he's wanting for terms. We're in kind of I call it the silly season right now for free agents, because for some free agents, they're better off right now to not sign and just to wait till the draft goes by, and maybe even wait into training camps to wait for an injury because they're going to get paid more. And teams in general, when they get to this point, when you're getting this time of year, they often want to wait. And so that's probably a guy the Dolphins are going to look at deciding what to do with after the draft. Because if they decide to maybe use, like, say, a second-round pick on a guard, then that doesn't make a lot of sense to pay that guy the cap space to come in, and then you turn around and draft a guard in the draft. And so it's so hard to make personnel moves close to the draft because you just don't know who's going to fall where and who you're going to get. And so I believe Miami could absolutely use him. I think he could start for the team and upgrade him. So I think he's a name to keep an eye on. It's always a catch-22 because it always seems like they wait on those guys, and then, you know, those guys end up signing with another team, and then we don't get the guy in the draft, and we end up with, you know, another year of bad guard play. So the when is in question, but unfortunately, I have not heard any. Unless you guys have, I heard anything in the grapevine that they're even interested in looking at him right now. Not from anybody anyway.
I haven't heard anything about it.
I don't think the Dolphins are actually looking towards signing any more veteran guards or anything like that at the moment. They already signed Craig Urbick out of Buffalo, and yes, I did get his name right finally. So I don't think the Dolphins are actually looking towards bringing in a veteran guard, at least not right now. They seem content, for better or worse, to let Urbick come in, and then McClendon and Billy Turner and Jamil Douglas, and of course the infamous Dallas Thomas
and Bushrod.
Oh yeah, that's right, Bushrod, who's gonna wind up fighting for that guard spot too, apparently.
And they'll possibly draft one more guard too. I mean, they'll have a lot to choose from.
Yeah.
The question will be, do two guys step up? I mean, let's just hope that it's not Dallas Thomas again.
I'm really hoping they cut Dallas Thomas, guys.
They're not going to cut Dallas Thomas.
I'm still pretty high on Douglas and Turner, especially with new coaching coming in and maybe some better schemes. So, I wouldn't mind a veteran guard, but I don't think that's the critical issue on the team right now on coming into the year. So, Urbick, I'm hoping signing Urbick means the end of Dallas Thomas as much as you think they won't cut him, Lewis.
They won't cut him. I'm telling you.
God, I'm hoping they do. I don't want to see him playing anymore. And I just feel like if they don't cut him, he's going to end up playing. And so, I don't know. At least Philbin's gone. I think of that dream that Philbin thought that he could turn Dallas Thomas into, you know, a big player. But I'm tired of seeing him give what I call lookout blocks, where you just pretty much turn it around and yell into the quarterback to look out, because that's all the time you're giving him. But anyway, I think they're going to just go and draft a guard right now in the draft. I think that's probably their plan, and I don't anticipate they'll sign a veteran guard unless there's a freak injury or something in camp, and there's one that's still decent available. So that's just what I think.
Well, a couple things. After May 10th, they can sign all the free agents they want, and it no longer counts against the compensatory picks. So that's good to know.
Is that how that works?
Yeah. So once May
first cuts and whatever.
Once May 10th comes, after May 10th, you can.
When is the draft, guys? Is that over by then?
Yeah, it is over because it's a very, very end of April.
So that would be your premier time if they're going to go grab some veteran guards.
The draft, if there's somebody they really want to get at. Now, this is an interesting one, and I'm kind of using over the cap now because we're talking about who could get cut and not cut. Dallas Thomas, if we cut him this year, would be only $150,000 in dead money, would be $1.7 million in cap savings. I think there's a good chance that Dallas Thomas gets cut.
I agree, Ron. I agree.
At 1.7 million savings and only 150,000 in dead money, considering all the guards they brought in and how poorly he's done, and every time you put him in there, he just doesn't play well. I think there's a good chance come the end of camp that bye-bye to Dallas Thomas.
Well, I mean, they had this mindset, and this was a big Philbin thing, that he wanted utility guys in particular on the line, with the idea being, hey, if I got a guy that can play both guard and tackle, then I don't have to use up a roster spot on a backup tackle. And then inevitably our tackles get hurt, and you end up with Dallas Thomas trying to play tackle, which is just horrific. I mean, I have to imagine Ryan Tannehill has nightmares of Dallas Thomas being his offensive tackle, because he's probably one of the worst offensive tackles in the league, and he's not that good at guard, but I mean, he's ridiculously bad at tackle. And so I just want to see him go, because I don't want to see them thinking, you know what, maybe Bushrod isn't working out because we have Dallas Thomas who can play tackle, so let's just let Bushrod go because he's not going to make a starting guard. I absolutely want backup tackles this year that, like, if Brent Albright gets hurt, we need to have somebody that can come in that's at least competent. And so that's another reason I want Dallas Thomas gone. I hope there is absolutely no mindset whatsoever on the team that he can be like the third or fourth tackle on the team.
I will say this much. If it turns out that Dallas Thomas is actually playing, then that means that either the Dolphins are absolutely terrible at picking out offensive line talent, and there's actually literally no one better than Dallas Thomas, which is a scary thing to think about, or Adam Gase is just as dumb as Joe Philbin, and that would be a horrible thing to think about. Because it's up to him who stays and who goes at the end of the day. So let's go ahead and move on to the next topic here. We're going to discuss what you think about the what the team's biggest need is right now. Now, obviously, the Dolphins have been trying to fill a few holes here and there, trying to be very careful with their free agency, trying to make sure that they don't sign somebody who will count against the compensatory formula. They want to accumulate as many draft picks as possible, obviously, and that's something I find admirable. But it's left the team with some holes, and very significant holes at that. So since last time I started with Chad, I'm going to start with you, Ron. Now that the first wave of free agency is pretty much over, what do you think is the biggest need for the Dolphins right now?
Cornerback. I feel like cornerback is the number one need for us.
Care to elaborate? Never mind. Nah, don't worry.
Let's face it. Right now, who do you have that you really feel like, oh, at least we're good at that spot at cornerback? You need three. Do you even really 100% feel like right now we have one? Do we even know? Have we seen Byron Maxwell play one snap in a Dolphin uniform?
Bobby?
I mean, you feel that confident in him that you're plugging him in and you don't have to worry about it?
Well, at the
or do you
slot.
think that maybe is it a maybe, or do you feel confident in it?
Okay, do I feel confident in Bobby as a boundary? No. Do I feel good with him as a slot corner? Yes, that's what he was meant for. And of course, square peg, round hole screwed him up.
No, I get that, but I feel like cornerback is our number one need right now on defense. I tell you what, when you had Channing Crowder on your show a few weeks
back. It's our show now, Ron. You're one of us.
Sorry, on your show a few weeks back, man, it opened my eyes. Quarterback, O-line, cornerback, defensive end. I mean, I'm telling you, I just feel like he was so right on that. Those four positions are what tells you whether your team is good or not good. And I just feel like, I know that I've been harping on linebacker for a year now, but I just feel like we really need to figure out this cornerback spot, and I'd like to see him get a cornerback in the first round of the draft.
I can't disagree with that idea. How about you, Chad? Do you agree with him?
Wholeheartedly. I always say I have a saying when you look at the year, paper always lies both ways. And so I've seen teams down on paper that look like we've got a really good team, and they end up like this year 6-10. And I've seen teams that don't look very good that end up being playoff teams. And so I think this team right now, people are too down on the team that it's deceiving, because I think people forget players improve that are young players. And so I think our receiving cores in Ryan Tannehill with a year together again are going to be even better. Stills and Parker, I think, will be a lot better. Landry's already a beast. And so I don't think there's a lot of offensive issues we even need to address right now. I think our offensive pieces are in place. We needed somebody like Gase to actually know how to use them. Yeah, we could use a guard, but nothing like what our situation is a corner right now. I mean, we got to play Tom Brady twice a year, and if you're planning on lining up Bobby McCain, Tony Lippett, and Byron Maxwell against Tom Brady, he's going to throw up 40 to 50 points on you. I mean, that I can tell you that. I don't care what scheme you try to run on defense, you're going to get torched. And not that I'm not high on Lippett and McCain, but they just haven't played very much. You've got two unproven guys. That's what those guys are. I like Tony Lippett's ability. I like Bobby McCain's instincts, but I have no feel whether I think you can line them up all game long and they can handle covering Edelman in the slot and not just get burned over and over and over and over. And so we absolutely have got to get cornerback help. And there really wasn't that much help in free agency. That there were a few decent corners, and they got paid ridiculous amounts of money. So I'm okay with the concept of let's just go get a corner, but I just can't see any scenario right now that Miami can't afford to get 2 corners in this draft, probably in the first 3 picks. I know they've got to address the running back position, but I mean, you can get running backs a lot easier than you can get quality corners, and that I don't see how they have a choice. Now, the thing that's interesting to me right now is they did that trade. And so in my mind, obviously I like Kiko Alonso. I think that was a brilliant move to get him. He's such a huge upgrade over Shepard, in my opinion. Even if he only misses a couple of games, he's still a huge upgrade. Maxwell, I'm not extremely high on, but I do believe he's a solid corner. I don't think, again, I'm not saying he's, a Darrell Revis.
He's a good
guy.
2.
But he's going to be one of your starting 3, and I feel confident in that. But when you look at what's out there, I'm wondering if somebody that the Dolphins are targeting, obviously they already know that the number 1 draft, the guy Jalen Ramsey is going to be gone. He'll probably be a top 3 or 4 pick, but he's absolutely going to be gone. More than likely by the time they would have picked at 8. And so if you take Ramsey off the board, you kind of have this cluster of corners that you're not quite sure who fits where, and they're going to vary a lot in this team. And so I feel like when Miami made that trade to fall back to 13, I think they have a guy that they want to bring in a corner that they feel pretty confident is going to be there. And I know right now a lot of people are saying, "Oh, it's Hargreaves," and I think there's a good chance Hargreaves will be there. But he's been making some buzz lately, and I've even seen it being talked about a little bit even on Twitter and stuff. But keep an eye out on William Jackson from Houston. The guy, he's lanky, he's tall, he's fast, and I think that's kind of where they want to go with the cornerback position, is guys that are a little bit taller. And I have a feeling that might just be what they're thinking. They have a guy like that targeted, so they were just fine dropping back. And it wouldn't shock me at all if that's what they're thinking, like somebody like William Jackson. They may trade back again, especially if this quarterback situation gets interesting. If, I still, I was saying this on last week's show, I think the Rams are desperate for a quarterback. They don't want to make that obvious, but they absolutely are desperate. The Jets are desperate for a quarterback, and there's several other teams that want a quarterback of the future that have older quarterbacks. And so the 3 top quarterbacks in this draft, if we get to 13 and one of those guys are still on the board, I think it's highly probable Miami's going to trade back and maybe take somebody like William Jackson maybe in the later part of the first round and maybe get the guy they're targeting. Because I don't feel, and maybe you guys feel differently, but once you take Ramsey off the board, I don't see the guy that stands out as the obvious number 2 corner. And maybe there's a guy that does to you guys, but I think you could probably get, if you take William Jackson or you take Eli Apple or you take Brennan Hargraves, there's all these guys that I think are probably fairly comparable, but they've got to get one of them, regardless of who it is. I can't imagine they're going to be able to get a corner for unless they make some weird trade. How are they going to actually put a competent corner on the field after the draft?
I don't pretend to be a draft guru. I don't pretend to know that everything about it, but just hearing from people that I respect and people who actually do this studying for this sort of thing, after Ramsey, it really comes down to what it is that you want. Because I've heard people say that William Jackson is the best possible scheme fit for the Dolphins by far. I've heard that Vernon Hargreaves is the highest ceiling player of all of the draft besides Ramsey. I've heard people say that Mackenzie Alexander is the best. He just doesn't fit the scheme. I've heard people say that Eli Apple, with his size and his potential, could be an excellent pick at 13. For the Dolphins, it's a tougher situation because, like, if you're playing man and you're getting up in people's faces all the time, then if that's the kind of scheme that you have, then a team is probably looking at somebody like Alexander, because that's what he does best. And Keith has stated several times on the show that he doesn't see Alexander as a zone corner so much as he plays man to man and he gets into people's faces and he gets handsy with them. So something like a Jamar Taylor who didn't decide to get torched all the time. So with that in mind, then if you play man, then you're probably looking at Alexander. Now, if you're a zone team like the Dolphins are going to be, then you're probably looking at Hargreaves. You're probably looking at William Jackson. So to answer the question, no, I don't see anybody standing out above and beyond the rest after Jalen Ramsey. So it really comes down to what kind of a scheme fit are you looking for?
Right. So that's kind of the point I'm making, Lewis, where I think Miami realized that when they did the trade down to 13.
Well, if that's what they're looking at, then all I can say is that they better make sure they get their guy. And that's not like there's only like we know that we pretty much all unanimously agree that cornerback is the biggest need for the Dolphins right now, at least defense wise, if not on offense. Obviously, offensive line is the biggest deal on offense, but even that is trounced by the fact that right now there's no corner besides Maxwell that has any sort of substantial playing experience. Bobby McCain is probably the one next up. Or rather,
Right.
Jamar. Actually, I take it back. Jamar Taylor has more experience than
right. Maybe
Bobby.
I'm not giving up on Jamar Taylor. He hasn't been able to make that leap forward. And I of the guys that are on the team, I'm the highest on Tony Lippett because he has, I think, the most natural ability that he can play on the outside. He has the speed, he has the jumping ability, and you saw that in that last game of the year against the Patriots, where he actually screwed up and he actually had the recovery speed to make a play. And at corner, you just nothing beats the ability to have recovery speed. I mean, that's what you need. But I just feel like as you've watched the moves the Dolphins are making, they put that offer into C.J. Anderson and they lost out on him. But to me, if Miami was really, really gunning for Elliott in this draft, they probably aren't going to make that offer to C.J. Anderson. They're probably going to wait and see if they get Elliott and then, maybe sign him back after the draft. And so it makes me feel like they've got a corner targeted that isn't like an obvious, top 10 corner. And there really isn't an obvious top 10 corner. And that's why I'm starting to wonder, maybe it is somebody like William Jackson, because I think that's a pretty safe bet that he'll be on the board at 13. I don't think he's going to come off the board before like Hargreaves or maybe Eli Apple or Mackenzie Alexander. And so if that's like the guy they've got targeted as their number 2 corner, and if you look through where you feel like he's going to be available, everything Miami's doing kind of makes sense. They've traded back once now. They picked up some players. They went and tried to get a running back. And so it just feels like that's their target is one of these corners right now.
Well, there's definitely options to choose from. I'm sure if Keith manages to get here, we'll discuss them a little more in depth. But I'm also looking at linebacker, guys, and I realize that Kiko Alonso fixes that a lot. But like, I'm tired of linebacker being an issue. I'm tired of bringing out people who have no earthly idea of what they're doing. I'm tired of linebackers standing there waiting to see if the defensive line is going to actually hold them back, and then, oh wait, they didn't, I guess we better get moving. I'm tired of those kinds of linebackers. I'm tired of Shepard. I'm tired of the whole Messi experiments. I mean, just let the man rest somewhere. I'm tired of just bad linebacker play, and Channing said that there's nothing that bugs him more than bad linebacker play, and that's exactly what Miami has suffered from the past 2 years, and that's been a big part of why the defense has fallen apart altogether. So I'm also looking at the possibility of maybe Reggie Ragland out of Alabama, and if there's one thing we can say about Alabama players, it's that they are pretty much topped out to start with, so there wouldn't be a whole lot of development necessary for Reggie Ragland. He is a middle linebacker, which would fit the bill for the Dolphins, since a lot of people are saying that Kiko Alonso isn't really a middle linebacker per se. He's more along the lines of somebody who needs to play on the outside because of his speed and his ability. So if Ragland shows up and plays in the middle, that can shift Kiko to the side, and then Jelani Jenkins for one more year, and maybe Neville Hewitt, since he's starting to make some flashes. We could potentially have a stud linebacker core for the first time since, when was the last time? I can't even remember when was the last time. Maybe I wasn't even born yet, but since we had a good linebacker core in Miami. So what do you guys think about the possibility of linebacker, which is also a huge need?
Yeah, I think if it doesn't go their way with cornerback, they can't trade out of it. Maybe Ezekiel Elliott's gone. I could see them looking to linebacker, and that's definitely my guy right there, Reggie Ragland. I like just a guy that you feel like can be there a good 4 or 5 years and hopefully into a second contract. That's what you're always hoping for when you draft these guys, I assume, anyway. That's the player I'd really like to see for sure. So I'm hoping that if they do go that way, that's the player they would choose.
Yeah, the dream of Miles Jack in Miami has long since passed for me, since it's pretty obvious he wouldn't there was not even there didn't even seem to be a real possibility he'd make it to 8, let alone 13.
Yeah,
So
and a different kind of guy than we're talking about with Ragland. I mean, those guys, it's almost apples and oranges with the way those guys play. They're just different. So it just depends on what kind of scheme you think that Miami's going to run in the future. We hear a lot of talking about switching to the 3-4, but we really don't know that that's going to happen or not. It seems to be back and forth. They'll probably do a little bit more of a hybrid, I would imagine, anyway, like most teams do. So I think that the Ragland would be the choice, but no, Miles Jack's not dropping to 13 likely.
no, he wouldn't even drop to 8. Who was the other guy I just thought of? Oh yeah, I just thought of another linebacker, Jalen Smith. Obviously, he got banged up, and his possibility he may never even play again. He has a Marcus Lattimore kind of situation here. So, but given that, that Jalen Smith, when healthy, is a stud in the defense. So, just for the sake of argument here, if you were going to look at Jalen Smith, what round would you bring him in?
Got to be late, Lewis. With his type of injury, you really can't count on him to even probably play in 2016. And so that means you got to commit a contract to a guy who's already a year out on the contract. And so I wouldn't draft Jalen Smith right now until probably earlier than the 5th round, unless you have some special medical thing on him where you really feel like it looks certain he's going to get back. But I just don't think you're going to get that prior to the draft. And so I don't think Miami has the luxury to use a higher pick on a guy, based on what he might be in 2017 or 2018.
Yeah, I'm the same with you. 5th is exactly the round that I had in mind, and I don't know that any team really has the luxury to spend a 1st, 2nd, or 3rd round pick on a player that had an injury like that. That's just super risky. I feel like somebody's going to draft this guy when you start getting into, or maybe into the low 4th round, into the 5th round. Somebody, I mean, depending on what the medical looks like. These guys have a better knowledge of it than we do. Their team doctors, well, probably this guy will be seen by 32 team doctors before the draft comes, if he hasn't been already. So they'll have a pretty good clue of what's going on there. Depending on what that really looks like, yeah, mid to late rounds for sure by somebody. If not Miami, someone probably take a shot on him.
Well, it's a tough situation for me because it's not like Jalen Smith is, he's got a high ceiling. Maybe we can work with him. No, Jalen Smith is somebody who would have been an instant upgrade, and he would have started for a lot of teams just right off the bat. So it's a tough situation for me because I kind of don't want to let him get away just like that. Because, even if he won't play in 2016, which he won't, he may not even play at all. That's the big crapshoot here, is that he may or may not even get to hit the NFL ever. So, but there's that possibility, that potential. If you could get, just imagine if you got Reggie Ragland and you wound up drafting Jalen Smith later on for the later years. If Miami's rebuilding, which I believe they are, then if you can get Jalen Smith and Reggie Ragland in the same draft, that takes care of the linebacker core, assuming Smith is healthy. That takes care of the linebacker core for years to come.
No doubt.
And that would give the Dolphins a lot of flexibility to work with because, with all due respect to Vance Joseph and what he's saying about how the defensive line and the secondary is where he wants to build, it's really been the linebackers that have been a mess, and it's forced a lot of compromises on defense. Rashad Jones had to play in the box almost more than half the season because he was the team's best linebacker, and he was playing strong safety. So if you have that kind of a situation, it makes the defense have to it's like auxiliary power in Star Trek. We have this other part of the ship that's weak now, so let's put in the auxiliary power. Rashad Jones was acting as auxiliary power on top of his regular duties, so that puts a lot of strain on the defense, and it's because the linebackers were just awful. Like, you can beef up the secondary all you want, but if your linebacker core is a mess, that means that you have no core. You have up front and in the back. So what happens when people attack the middle? You either have to have somebody in the back move in, or you have to have somebody up front move back. So that creates a lot of problems.
I completely agree with you, Lewis. It'll just come down to rounds. I'm not a big fan of Reggie Ragland at the 13th overall pick. I like Reggie Ragland. I would love to get him in the second round. I don't know if he'll fall that far.
No,
I don't think he will.
He's not falling that far.
I don't think so either. But, for Miami, I really feel like they want to have Jelani Jenkins on the field, and they want to have Kiko Alonso on the field. And so
That's still one slot left.
Yeah, and that's primarily your strong side linebacker. And so could Reggie Ragland come in and be the strong side linebacker?
Well, that's the thing. Well, Chad, but that's the thing, man, is that Reggie could come in and be the middle guy, and Kiko could move to the spot where people think he's a lot better, which is actually strong side.
I don't know.
I feel like
Kiko's more of a weak side linebacker and a middle linebacker than a strong side. I think that Ragland could do either. I think he could be on the strong side, or he could be in the middle. And he's a great athlete. It's just tough to take him at 13. That's all. I mean, I think he's probably more of a pick in the 20s in this draft. That's probably where he's going to fall in at. Maybe mid to late 20s. If they trade back somehow, but I mean, they've got to address the defensive backs. But a guy I'll just throw out there that could be interesting is Leonard Floyd. He's out of Georgia, but it depending on what they want out of their linebacker. But often, if you're going to get a guy that's more of a strong side guy, you really want a guy that can rush the passer. And Leonard Floyd is a pretty accomplished pass rusher. It's just he's one of these guys that they may need to put some weight on in terms of strength training. But he might be an interesting guy that would come in and maybe be an upgrade over a guy like Cole Messi. I really like Darren Lee in this draft, but I don't see any need for him on the team. I think Darren Lee is going to end up being a pretty good weak side linebacker, but with Neville Hewitt, Jelani Jenkins, and now Kiko, I don't see Miami going that route. I really think you're going to be looking more for a guy that's going to be over 250 pounds that's able to rush the passer and stop the run. So I think that's the kind of guy you're looking at, that outside linebacker, defensive end sort of player that they'll be looking at.
Okay, so we actually have a caller. It's our good friend Tony. So Tony, welcome to the show, man. What's on your mind?
Hey guys, I just started listening to y'all talking about the draft. Have y'all discussed much about possibly trading now with Miami?
We've brought it up once or twice, but we never actually had a deep discussion about the possibility of trading down. So what's on your mind?
Well, I think that's something that they're going to look to do. I mean, they're so conscious about trying to protect the compensatory picks that they've got here in 2017. You've got to think this team wants to try to add additional picks, and I think if one of the quarterbacks starts dropping in the first round, I think they possibly could have a chance of possibly obtaining some additional picks. And I think if you drop down a little bit, I think you can bring a Reggie Ragland into play, or William Jackson into play. A couple of players that I really do like, and I think Miami will look at. As a matter of fact, I think I read today where William Jackson is going to be in Miami, if not today, tomorrow. So, I mean, obviously, he's been rumored to be on Miami's radar here for a few weeks now, and obviously with him coming in to the complex to talk with the team, obviously they're showing pretty serious interest in the young man. So I like y'all. I mean, I think you got to address cornerback. I think if you could get, say, a Reggie Ragland in the first round, and then possibly look at an Xavier Howard, the cornerback from Baylor, in the second round. I think your first two picks, if they were those two guys, I would be happy with those first two picks. But I'm thinking Miami is going to really look to try to gain some additional draft picks by trading down to add some some talent on this roster via the draft.
I don't disagree with you, Tony. I think they're out. The thing is that every team in the league, like, let's be honest, with the exception of maybe the people who have the idea of they want the best player there and they're like number 1, 2, or 3, and they actually have somebody who's there that they want because they're that good, like somebody like Jalen Ramsey or somebody like a Laramie Tunsil for the Tennessee Titans, then it's like every team wants to trade down. Every team wants to gain more picks because they would much rather have more picks than take a flyer on a guy who may or may not be this stud in the first round. Like, you take somebody like say Reggie Ragland. You don't want to get him too early because he's good, but you don't know if he's going to be great. You have Vernon Hargreaves. He's good, but you don't know if he's going to be great. Mackenzie Alexander, Eli Apple, all these other guys, they're good, but you don't know if they're like early first round worthy. So everybody wants to trade down. Everybody wants to see if they can find a way to get more draft picks and still get the guy that they are actually looking at in the first round. Or maybe some teams even try to draft that and bump out of the first round altogether because they want to see if they can get a bunch more picks on it because the meat is in the middle. Like, unless you're a team that is desperate for a quarterback, like Chad said earlier, and even if the team is, I'm going to be honest, if they've done their homework, then I don't think they're going to be thinking that. I don't think they're going to be panicking and say, oh my God, this quarterback is going to go if we don't jump up and get him right now. Because with all due respect to the quarterbacks in this draft, I mean, Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, Paxton Lynch, Cardale Jones, which everybody seems to have conveniently forgotten about, none of those guys scream instant upgrade to me. They could be better. Like, for a team like the Rams, who right now is just Nick Foles or something like that. I don't even know if he's with the team anymore. Maybe they cut him. I don't even remember. But no, they didn't. They were thinking about trading for Nick Foles? I believe that was the story. So
no, he's still with them.
Yeah, he's still with the Rams. So unless you're somebody like a Nick Foles, or you're looking at a team like the Jets, because the whole Ryan Fitzpatrick situation it's pathetic, but it's still going on. So, and even then, you still have two quarterbacks who there's a bunch of arguments going on about who is the best quarterback. It's not like back in 2012 when the situation was, well, are you picking Andrew Luck or are you picking RG3? Or are you looking at Tannehill or Brandon Whedon? Or everything seems interchangeable. There's no set guy that you can look at and say, yep, that's the best quarterback in this draft. So it's almost like, if I'm a team like the Rams who need a quarterback, I'm looking at these guys and I'm thinking, well, this guy is our guy, but if he's not there, then we could probably get by with this other guy, because nobody in this draft, and usually it's quarterbacks that teams jump up for that sort of a thing. I don't see anybody in this draft who team is going to be like, if we don't get this guy, we're screwed. And that's going to be the biggest factor in trying to trade down at all.
Well, you never know.
I don't agree with you on that, Lewis. I think you're going to be surprised because I think it's been proven over and over again. You cannot succeed in the NFL if you don't have a solid quarterback.
Well, I know that, but it's like what I'm saying is that in this draft, just specifically this draft, there's nobody there that I'm thinking there's a team going to be desperate to get this one guy.
I disagree. I think that is going to be. I think obviously Cleveland is going to take either Goff or Wentz. I don't know who they favor, but I would be absolutely stunned if Cleveland didn't take a quarterback. And once you then go through Cleveland, I think both those guys are going to be top 10 picks, Carson Wentz and Jared Goff. And you can disagree with me. I'm just telling you that's going to be the case. And there's going to be some interest to trade up. And if Paxton Lynch is on the board, after Paxton Lynch, I don't see anybody that you can conceivably go into next year and say, we're going to start this guy as a rookie and see how it goes. I think the Rams and Jets are both desperate for quarterbacks right now. And with Miami sitting at 13, let's say you're the Rams. The Rams, in my mind, they have got to be trying to figure out how do we maneuver to get a quarterback. Because if they're going to go in to Los Angeles with Nick Foles at quarterback, they're insane just from a marketing standpoint. So assuming the Rams don't jump up into the top 10 to get a hold of Wentz or Goff, and they want Paxton Lynch, they're going to be awful nervous when a team like Miami's on the board at 13. And I would think they would be more than willing to give up, maybe a third-round pick or something, or even a second-round pick, just to jump up and secure that quarterback, because they just simply can't afford to just wait and hope the Jets don't jump up above them, or somebody just decides to take them. Maybe Detroit just decides to take them. For whatever reason, they take Paxton Lynch, and so if you're a team like the Rams, I don't see how they can afford not to go get that quarterback right now, or the Jets. I mean, how can anybody realistically think the Rams or the Jets right now can go into this season and even consider a shot at the playoffs without getting a better quarterback? And I don't see how they even have a chance of getting a better quarterback unless they roll the dice on one of those top 3 guys in this draft. And so for that reason, I really think Miami's in a position where they may decide to trade back down. It just depends on the offers and what people are wanting. But at 13, I don't think you have that blue chip player on the board that you're going to get maybe in the top 10 picks, where you have a D tackle or an offensive tackle that you just know this guy is going to be a starting player for me, maybe a Pro Bowler for the next decade. They're going to draft those guys. But then once you pass that 10 slot, that's when I think it gets interesting with these quarterbacks and the Rams and the Jets in particular. And that would be a really interesting scenario for the Dolphins to be in, is if the Jets are offering them a deal to move up. Do you let the Jets get Paxton Lynch, or do you try to just make them have to roll with Geno Smith, or hope they get Fitzpatrick on their side? And so it'll be really interesting. But with Tony's thought, I think it's very likely Miami's interested in trading back down yet again. And as I was mentioning, I think they have a cornerback targeted that they have identified as their number 2 guy on the board behind Ramsey. And I think they've also determined that this guy is going to be available to them for sure at 13. And I wouldn't be surprised if they'd be comfortable to drop all the way back to where the Rams are or the Jets are and still get somebody like him. So I think that the possibility of the trade back's much higher this year than it has been in the past for the Dolphins.
Well, and you never know when a team identifies a player that they want to come up and get. I mean, San Diego came up last year to get Melvin Gordon, the running back out of Wisconsin last year. So, I mean, you never know what a team is valuing and what a team is looking for. And if you are a team like Miami that wants to consider trading down, I mean, you got a group of players in the first round that you probably got interest in that you wouldn't mind taking at a latter point in the first round. I mean, Ragland, William Jackson, possibly Eli Apple. I know both of y'all, all of y'all guys are familiar with Simon Clancy, and I keep up with him on Twitter as well. Mm-hmm. And he brought up a point about Miami's D-line coaches, being heavily involved in the Ole Miss Pro Day and working out Robert Mkhitaryan. So while, you've got to do your homework on this kid and check his background thoroughly in regards to, what's going on with him. And as well as, checking his film, I mean, as far as some of his inconsistencies, I mean, there's no question he's got a world of talent. And if you add a motivated Mkhitaryan into the interior D-line with the Dolphins and provide additional pass rusher with an Ndamukong Suh, I mean, it's not like Tannenbaum doesn't mind rolling the dice. So, I mean, I think we got some interesting scenarios that we can look at as we get close to the draft. And I think you're going to start hearing all kind of crazy trade scenarios. But I don't think quarterback is the only position that somebody might want to come up and get. You never know what these teams and when and if they fall in love with a particular player. But I think if Miami does get a chance to trade back into the first round, and let's not just make it tie hands with just the first round. I think maybe they look to trade down in all the other portions of the draft as well, second round, third round, just in the search to try to get additional picks to try to add talent to this team. So, I think the goal is to try to get additional picks to try to add more talent to this team, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Well, like I said, there's always that possibility. Like this team could fall in love with X running back from X college here, but my only point was not. My point was not to suggest that it wouldn't happen. My point was not to suggest that it couldn't or shouldn't happen. My point was only that trading down is often not as easy as it seems, because who says that they'll trade with the Dolphins? Maybe they'll trade with somebody who's gotten the number 12 pick, or maybe they'll trade with somebody who has the number 14 pick. If it means that they're going to get a little bit, they're going to have to give up a little bit less. I mean, it's trading down is not as easy as it sounds. Like everybody wants more picks. Everybody wants to trade down, and there's no guarantee that the Dolphins are going to be the choice for a trade down. Some team may think they can use the 15th pick and get them. Some team may decide they can get the 14th, the 12th, the 11th, or the 13th. Maybe the Dolphins pick. But it's not like the Dolphins are the only team making phone calls to see if they can get more picks. That's my only point. It's not as easy as it seems to make the trade down.
Oh, I mean, I think we all understand that scenario that you're talking about. And if Miami can't make a trade down at number 13, then you'd be ready to make the pick. But, I mean, to say that that's something that Miami won't try to do, and like I said, it's not just the first round. I mean, they're in position in the following rounds where they're picking at number 8. So they're high enough after the first round where they can do some work. And I know what you're about to say. I know you're not saying – it's not going to happen, and that it can't happen. But I mean, I'm just saying, I think they're going to try, like you said, like a lot of other teams, and just I think it's something that they're going to try to do.
Yeah, I don't doubt that.
I agree with that too. I just think it's easier to trade down in the middle of the first. If you have a top 10 pick, the value on that top 10 pick is so high because there are just exceptional players at positions in there. But when I look at what Miami needs, they obviously need a corner and a running back. But I mean, if you're going to make a trade, say with the Rams, and you're going from 13 to 15, that's not that pricey of a move for the Rams to do. You know what? If they want Paxton Lynch, I don't think they would even flinch at giving Miami like a third or a fourth to get him and just jump up and grab him when he's there. And for Miami to go from the 13th overall pick to the 15th overall pick, I think it's extremely likely whoever they're targeting is still going to be on the board, unless they're targeting Elliott. That's the only guy I could see that they're going to be biting their fingernails if they decided they want to get him, because he's really the only back in this draft where he can just opening day be your number one running back. But other than that, if they're really targeting a corner, I absolutely feel like they're going to be in play if those quarterbacks are available there. And the teams that I think are going to be most interesting will be Houston, Los Angeles, and the Jets, because all three of those teams really need a starting quarterback. And, where they're sitting, Houston's all the way back at 22, the Jets are at 20, and the Rams are at 15. If I were the fans of those teams and the people involved with those teams, I'd be really, really nervous if my plan was to get Paxton Lynch, because you're hoping he makes it all the way down to you. That's pretty risky.
Well, Houston, do you still think Houston is going to look at a quarterback now that they made the move and spend the money on Brock Osweiler? I don't know if Houston is going to be that team.
That's right. Forgive me, I forgot about Osweiler. So it would be the Jets or the Rams. That Houston will not be trading up after they paid all the money to Brock. I forgot about that trade. So
here's another question for you, Chad. You mentioned Cleveland. Are you still taking into account that RG3's there now?
Yeah, I think Cleveland's still going to take a quarterback number one overall. I don't believe they think RG3 is going to suddenly be their franchise quarterback. I just don't see it. I think they've got to go after either Goff or Wentz. I don't know which one.
I'm honestly not sure if I agree with that. I think if anything, they bring in somebody who can develop, because I think from what I've heard is that Hugh Jackson really wants to try and resurrect RG3.
Well, if that's true, not to sound like Mel Kiper, but Cleveland's going to be losing the division for a while yet, because RG3, as much as I like him as a person and how he conducts himself, he is not a very good pocket passer. And so he's already proven it's hard to put him on the run a lot and let him start taking a bunch of hits again. He's just not that big. And his abilities aren't the same they used to be since he's had the knee injuries. And so I don't see how he's suddenly going to become really good at being a pocket passer when he never has been that good at being a pocket passer. So I don't know. Maybe. I mean, you could be right, Lewis. But if I'm Cleveland, I'm tired of not having a quarterback, and so you always have to look like how many times are you going to have the top one or two picks, and when you're there and you see those quarterbacks, if you don't grab them when they're there, you may not be there for a while. Maybe next year Cleveland will be picking ninth overall or something like that, and they don't have the shot at the quarterback. So if I were them, I think you'd be insane not to grab one of those two guys and put him with RG3 with the idea that, well, hopefully RG3 or this quarterback is going to be our guy now going forward. But to just rely on RG3 when you have the number 2 overall pick, that'd be pretty crazy.
I mean, it's really only depending on, do they like one of those guys? I mean, if they do all their due diligence scouting these guys and they have a really high grade on one of these guys and don't draft them because they signed RG3, well, they're idiots. Now, on the other hand, if they're just kind of so-so on these guys, but they feel like they really need to draft a quarterback, so they do it, well, then they're idiots. So they need to it really going to come down to their grade on these guys. And that's really this whole conversation. It's about for the whole first round and into the second round as Miami and other teams coming right out of the combine started to really grade these top guys. That's probably when Miami decided out of the combine, doing some interviews, doing their due diligence. Okay, we don't love anybody at 8, so we don't mind doing this trade and dropping down to 13. But now they're starting to build that board even deeper and get that list going even deeper. And they're finding guys they may or may not like even deeper. And that's when those decisions will be made. Okay, now we wouldn't even mind trading down, or no, we want to stay where we're at. So that's really what every team's doing now. And different teams are kind of, quote unquote, falling in love and grading high different players just depending on their process. So that's why it's just such a fluid situation because none of these teams are done building that board yet and really won't be till 10 days or so before the draft actually happens.
You can't fall in love again. Yeah. Okay. Hey, Tony, thanks for calling in, man. We really appreciate you calling in every week. So we'll see you again next week.
You got it, guys.
All right, man.
Take care.
Take care. All right, so that was Tony, and he's a regular caller for our PhinManiacs show, and we still have maybe another 15, 20 minutes to go before the show is over. So if you want to call in and give us your thoughts, you can call in at 1-954-376-5704, or you can tweet us at PhinManiacs. So before we call this a night, guys, we still have one more topic to go on. It's the whole Arian Foster thing and the idea of what exactly that is suggesting for the whole free agency strategy so far as a whole. Obviously, Arian Foster has a lot of talent. For when he's healthy, he's one of the better running backs in the NFL. He's patient. He knows how to handle a zone blocking scheme. He knows how to. He's just a really good running back. The problem is that he is injury prone, just like a lot of other people that the Dolphins have been bringing in recently. These guys who may or may not play because they're all banged up. Arian Foster, if he's healthy, easily takes over as the number 1 running back. And since he was cut from the Houston Texans, then he doesn't count against the compensatory picks. So first of all, I want to ask you guys the opinion on the whole Arian Foster thing, and then we'll go into a slightly different topic. So Chad, Arian Foster, yay or nay?
Oh, nay. He's not even healthy right now, so it was just nothing but a preliminary talk to him. I think if Miami's interested in Elliott, which I don't think Miami was ever super high on Elliott, or they would have never signed C.J. Anderson to that offer sheet. But if they've decided they want Elliott, if I were the Dolphins, I'd be bringing all these veteran backs because I'd want the teams behind me to not think I wanted Elliott, so that they wouldn't attempt to jump up in front of me to get him. So I'd be bringing in these free agent guys and making it appear that I have no interest in drafting Elliott. But I don't think. I mean, he was great, but God, when was the last time Arian Foster was actually healthy? I mean, I can't imagine you'd want to give him more than, real basic 1-year deal that was mostly incentive based. Otherwise, to expect him to come back and be able to play effectively, that'd be pretty risky. I think you'd be far better served just to grab a running back you feel pretty good at giving maybe 10 carries a game split with Ajayi than to go get Foster. That's my opinion.
Ron?
After the deadline to where we won't lose the comp pick,
Foster wouldn't count anyway.
Oh, is he cut? He's not
Yeah,
a
he
free
was
agent?
cut by the Texans.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. Then 100% yes. Because when he's healthy, he's special. And I still believe he has some of that left in him. And I don't think he would be so super expensive that it wouldn't be worth it. But obviously, it's going to depend on the medical with him. But if they feel comfortable in the medical that he can provide something, I mean, he would definitely fit the stuff that we've seen Gase want to do in the teams he's been on. I mean, the guy is as big a receiving threat as he is a running threat. And he's, I mean, when this guy's on fire, when this guy's playing at his game, he's one of the best in the NFL. I mean, so to be able to bring a guy like that on the team, for me, it's worth the risk. It's worth the chance.
So we have, I think it's like this may be a PhinManiacs moment here. We actually have two of our panelists disagreeing on something here.
Well, I don't disagree if he's back to form. It's been a long time since the Arian Foster he's describing's been able to do that for more than, maybe 2 or 3 games in a full season. So if it's a no risk contract, of course, but I don't think Arian Foster is going to be signing a no risk contract anytime soon until he's much better served to get healthy and be able to show a good physical and a good showing, and then he's going to get paid more money. So that I don't think Arian Foster is going to give the Dolphins a league minimum deal right now. So I don't have the confidence he's going to get back to be that guy that he was that Ron's talking about.
Well, what kind of contract would you feel comfortable with?
I would want to give him something between $750 and $1 million base salary.
Okay, but Chad, for Arian Foster, that's just not going to happen. Like even if he knew he was not going to be healthy again, like he's not going to take that. He's still Arian Foster.
Based on incentives, Lewis. So I'd give him up to $3 to $4 million, maybe even $5 million in incentives if he rushes for 1,000 yards. If he scores 10 touchdowns, if he has 500 yards in receiving, but that's my issue with him is I just don't feel confident he physically is going to hold up anymore to be able to provide that. And what I don't want to do is give him like a $3 or $4 million deal and have him have maybe 40 touches the whole year. And so that's the kind of contract I would want to give, just because he's had a major knee injuries, and he hasn't been healthy for an entire season, for at least 2-3 seasons now, when he was a top level running back. So
he was a top level running back 2 years ago. He got injured towards the end of the season, but if I'm not mistaken, I believe he rushed for 12 or 1,300 yards in a 13 or 14 game season in 2014. We're talking 2 seasons ago, and caught for 300 or 400 yards. I mean, we're literally 15 months removed from this guy having a 1,600 yard combined season with almost I think it was close to 5 yards per carry. It's not as far off from him playing well as we have it in our minds. Even though he has suffered injuries 3 years in a row, yes, he has shown talent only a year and a half ago. For me, it's worth the risk. Sign him for 3 or 4 million, cut Dallas Thomas and save 2. I like it. I'll just do that math right there and risk $2 million and lost a salary cap to have a guy like Arian Foster who could be a big difference on the team.
Okay, so just for the record, 2014, Chad, Ron, you were mentioning he played 13 games, 260 rushing attempts. He got 1,246 yards. He averaged 4.8 yards a carry, 8 touchdowns. And as for his receiving numbers in 14, he caught 38 passes for 327 yards, and he also caught 5 touchdowns. So he accounted for 13 of the Texans' touchdowns in 2014. And then he had a severe drop-off overall with the Texans in 2015. He only played 4 games. He averaged 2.6 yards a carry. But let's be perfectly honest, it's not like the Texans' offense was a juggernaut to begin with.
He was playing. He
sure he got hurt against the Dolphins, didn't he?
Yes,
Foster?
he did.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, he did.
Oh, Webb weekend is bad luck for Foster then.
Could be. So I'm open to Ron's thought. After the draft, if we don't get a running back in the first maybe 3 rounds or 4 rounds, if we get a young guy that we like, that we can pair with Ajayi, I'm a little tentative to spend the money, just because I want to make sure we have the cap space available to sign to our current players to extensions, and I want to avoid dead money. But if it really depends what Arian Foster is looking for, and that's probably more than anything what they were talking to him about was obviously he's not even healthy yet, and so he's going to have to pass his physical, show up and do a workout and look good. If he's looking good in a workout and we just don't have that back we're looking for, he's a great guy to pair with Ajayi because he's an old, vet that's been to the Pro Bowl. And I would hope he could be a real good mentor to Jay Ajayi, because I think Ajayi definitely needs a mentor with him.
Somebody to teach him patience.
But he's got to show me he's 100%, but because you can't. He's got to be able to play. I mean, as good as he has been, I have to see that he's there and feel really, really good that he's going to be able to continue doing that once he starts taking hits and starts doing hard cuts and when it's on. And that's a tough call, but it really comes down to what he's looking for, I guess.
I'd be willing to take him at 85%.
I think for me right now, the strategy with that is, unless they're just absolutely in love with Ezekiel Elliott, I think signing Foster before the draft is a good idea, because I think after the draft, you're going to have a lot of teams after him, number one. Number two, we really need to start building this defense and building it now. And I know a lot of people are talking Ezekiel Elliott, but I could just almost bet anything we're going to go defense in the first round. And then after that, might as well wait till 2016's draft to get running backs, because where you have Ezekiel Elliott. Oh, sorry, 2017 to get running back, because where you have just Ezekiel Elliott this year, you got 3 to 5 guys next year that are that could be something special.
What's that guy's name? Fournette or something?
Fournette, like and there's many others. Next year is just like the year of the running back.
Yeah, in the draft from Stanford might be in that bunch if he comes out as a junior.
It's the running back renaissance.
Yeah, it will be, and it will be. And the way we need defense this year, I mean, it's not like you're signing Foster for the future. I just say, unless they really feel uncomfortable about the medical, I think the signing needs to happen.
So I would agree with that. And for who Arian Foster is, I mean, he's done amazing things in his career. Like every year, any year that he hasn't been hurt, he's ran over 1,000 yards. His rookie year was in 2009. He only played 6 games, and even then he had 4.8 yards a carry. And then in 2010 he played all 16. He got 1,616 yards. 2011 he played 13 games, 1,224. 2012 he played the whole season, 1,424. I mean, Foster, even now, man, for somebody to have somebody like Arian Foster, even if he doesn't play right away, that would be an amazing thing. And if we can get him for less than what we would have gotten Lamar Miller for, I mean, I love Lamar, but if we're talking short term specifically, then I pick Foster, not Miller. I'd pick Foster over Lamar Miller, just short term. Long term, Lamar, but short term, oh yeah, I'm taking Arian Foster. That's just my thoughts on that. So, well, I think that's going to be it for today. So I think we've taken care of pretty much everything there is to talk about, unless somebody asked us to talk about Ryan Tannehill real quick. So so I guess we'll do that really fast here. So, yeah, somebody on the chat says, let's take Elliott at 13. We'll see, man. I don't know. Ezekiel Elliott has obviously a lot of talent, but he's a running back, and the Dolphins have serious needs on defense. So let's go ahead and talk some Ryan Tannehill real quick. We actually made it all the way here before we had to brought him up. So let's go ahead and bring him up. The question I got on Twitter was, why does everybody hate Ryan Tannehill so much? So, Chad, go ahead.
I don't know why everybody hates Ryan Tannehill.
I got an answer for that one.
I think it's because Tannehill hasn't been a guy that's a cocky in the spotlight sort of guy. I think he's just always been a guy that he's got a smile on his face, and you don't see him like
hating everything in life.
Yeah, you don't see him kicking the water cooler, when they lose a game or they throws a pick six. So I think people turning some people off, that they just feel like he doesn't have enough passion. I mean, that's all I can think of that maybe people don't like about him. That, and I think a lot of people are so unrealistic on how hard it is to get good quarterbacks, and so I think he's more underappreciated than anything, because I think he is a decent quarterback, and I'm not trying to portray he's a top 10 quarterback.
He's not a world beater.
No, I mean, no, he's not Tom Brady. He's not Peyton Manning. He's not Dan Marino. But
Peyton Manning isn't
he's
Peyton
still a top
Manning
15 quarterback in my mind. Just because he's not a top 5, I would rather have a top 15 quarterback than
Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, I don't want to have Josh McCown and Ryan Fitzpatrick. I've seen enough Cleo Lemon at quarterback. I've seen enough AJ Feely at quarterback and Jay Fielder and these guys that are guys that are more like in the mid to low 20s ranked quarterbacks. You just can't get anywhere with them. And I feel like at least Ryan Tannehill still has a pretty good ceiling to him. And he's a good quarterback. And until you can get me a quarterback that's better than him that is realistically obtainable, I'm going to keep rolling with him. If you want to draft a quarterback, great, more power to you. Take a shot at drafting a quarterback and maybe you hit. But I definitely don't want to run Ryan Tannehill out of town just because I don't like him for some reason. I guess I don't know.
Ron,
I just feel like people might be a little frustrated with the kind of the inconsistency. Honestly, I think that's probably what's the most frustrating is that you see such talent from him in periods of time, whether it's part of a game, a whole game, maybe a stretch of a couple games, and then all of a sudden you see these games like, man, what is this? What's going on here? And it's just been so much. Do we blame him? Do we blame the coach? Do we blame the play calling? Do we blame the offensive coordinators? Is he, there's just so much of that. I think it's just frustrating for Dolphins fans, honestly. And that's part of the reason why I think, again, when you're in Miami, you're still as a quarterback, you're still in the shadow of Dan Marino. And that doesn't go away for a long while, honestly. That doesn't go away for a long while because there's people like me who are only 40 years old who I hope to still be watching the Dolphins in 40 more years and will still always remember Dan Marino. There's a lot of people like that. So it's just tough. And it's tough because he's not Dan Marino. He's not going to be Dan Marino. But we want so bad for him to be a top 10 quarterback, a top 5 quarterback. And we just don't know if it's ever going to happen. So some people would say if you don't have a top 5 quarterback, you should just be trashing them until you do find one. So that kind of philosophy, which I don't necessarily agree with, and people saying that, obviously makes people want, they want us to do that. And instead, what do? We sign them to a $70-something million extension instead. So that
million.
Yeah, well, 96 total, 70-something extension. So that frustrates people as well. We're 6-10 last year. We haven't made the playoffs yet in 4 years, so he hasn't even been to a playoff game.
8 years, actually.
Well, under Tannehill, he's had 4 years.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And so all of these things combined. But if you're somebody, and I'm not a guy who watches tape, but obviously I think I've seen pretty much every game Tannehill has played. I mean, if you watch him play, there's skill, there's ability, there's talent there. And anybody that says there's not is just a liar, honestly, or they're not watching. It's just the truth. They got an agenda or whatever that says he doesn't have talent. He definitely has talent, and most experts who know what they're looking for in quarterback talent know that he does. And we're just waiting for him to see if he can put it all together. And I mean, the time's running out for him, though, to do it. It really is. I mean, this is kind of his last chance. You've got a guy in here that supposedly, quote unquote, is the quarterback whisperer. I know I'm tired of hearing myself say that.
Yeah, we've had 3 quarterback whispers now.
Yeah, but you're just waiting for it to happen. But at this point, if it doesn't happen now, I mean, it's probably just not going to, honestly. And there's just no more. And then the O-line, and is that been the excuse? Because he's been hit so much. He's been sacked so much. He's been one of the most hit and sacked quarterbacks his entire career. That definitely hasn't helped his growth and hasn't helped his performance, really, number one, for sure. I mean, we've had trouble with, having the kind of the right wide receivers for him. Yes, Wallace was fast, but he wasn't a good route runner, not even a 9 route. He doesn't even run a 9 route very well. I mean, just fast. Bottom line. He's just fast, and he's not even consistently fast. He's not a good wide receiver. I hate to say it, but he's just not.
We'll see what happens with Flacco. I think he still fails.
There's so many things that are because of Tannehill, so many things that are because of his situation, so many things that are because of players around. It's just a combination of everything. But it's not just them. It's part of it is on Tannehill as well. So it's all just a frustrating situation because the Dolphins fans, we expect more, and every year we're sold this, bill of goods that we're going to be so good, and we expect Tannehill to really take the leap, especially last year, because even the national pundits, most of them were really on Tannehill, thinking that he was really going to step up and take that leap, and obviously we saw regression. So that also is very frustrating for fans. So it's mostly frustration, I think, is what you're feeling, not necessarily hate in my mind.
As far as I'm concerned, like, all I seeing is that these are the people who see the big fat L and the big number is in the L column and the little number is in the W column, and it's just easiest to blame the quarterback. That's probably the biggest thing, and the fact that he's not Dan Marino.
I always like to point out to Lewis that a lot of people say, "Oh, he's got a $96 million contract." That of that deal, he's got, of the top quarterbacks, the lowest percent guaranteed.
Yeah.
So yes, he has a big contract, but
what did Brock Osweiler get?
I honestly, right now, guys, if the Dolphins just say they just cut Ryan Tannehill, I believe he'd become the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. And not that because he is. I just think that's the quarterback
because
market
money.
Right now. Yeah, like a team like the Jets or the Rams, they pay a massive contract to get Tannehill right now because he's so much better than what they have. And so to me, it's like you always forget, like, you want to have the top 5 guy, but you forget how bad the team that has like the 28th and 29th guy, how bad they want the 15th best guy. And so, the one thing that always surprises me, and Ron's right, you see a lot of frustration because they're not winning, but God, it just like, did everybody forget what it was like for the whole decade after Dan Marino, what we went through from Trent Green to, we just had nothing.
Dante Culpepper, Gus Farad, Joey
I know.
Harrington.
It was like, oh my God. I mean, it just was terrible. And so I always find it just ridiculous. People say, we need to get rid of Tannehill. I'm like, I am absolutely on board if you want to try to bring in other quarterbacks to compete with him and try to draft him. If you have a way to pull that off, great. But in terms of just cutting him, what's that?
Beat him in camp. Don't coddle him, but don't just boot him.
Bring quarterbacks in and compete with him if you want to. I'm all for competition.
If he loses, fine.
Yeah, exactly. Then you have a guy to replace him. But right now, if your plans to draft a rookie quarterback and roll with Matt Moore, I mean, I think you're crazy. That would be what my response would be.
Like, that's all it is. Like, seriously, you people want, like, talking about boom or bust. He's either gonna boom or he's gonna bust. Like, no, guys, you don't have to just give Tannehill the boot. Like, as long as he's the best option we've got, and like it or not, he is, you keep him. However, that does not mean you have to be married to him. Bring in some kid who's gonna come in and say, "Hey, Ryan, I'm coming for your job. Can you stop me?" Then that's okay, because then if Ryan loses, you have a good excuse to get rid of him. But if not, then you're just like setting the whole thing up for failure all over again. I think that's probably the one thing that I will agree with Omar Kelly on when it comes to quarterbacks. Have a plan B. The Dolphins don't have one.
Well, it's just hard to get a plan B. It's hard to get a plan A at quarterback right now in the league. So it's tough. But, I look at it like, how bad would it be if the Dolphins did get rid of him? And let's say he goes to the Rams, and, we were the ones who went through his phase of learning the game. And as he goes into, like, his, say, 6th and 7th season, he's up to, a top 10 quarterback playing at a Pro Bowl level, leading his team to the playoffs. How foolish would we look that we were the ones who took all the losses getting him developed, and then when he's ready, you ship him off and let another team win with him.
Wolfins. So, we talked about Ryan Tannehill. We talked about everything else we needed to. Batman versus Superman.
I thought you said don't bring that up.
Yeah, I know, but it's like I think Oob would have been very disappointed if I didn't say something. And then I think I'll give Matt some fantasy baseball advice. So, Batman versus Superman. Stop complaining that it's not Marvel. Stop complaining that everything is too dark. Stop complaining all that other stuff. I don't see why if Marvel can get away with it, the DC cannot. Okay, so that's my thoughts on that. Let Superman and Batman fight and do whatever. I don't know what happens. I think I heard rumors about. Never mind spoilers. But whatever. I don't care. I need to watch the movie first, and then maybe I can give a better opinion. And as for fantasy baseball, Matt, just don't pick any Marlins. Okay, that's the best advice I can give you. Just don't pick any Marlins.
Pick Cubs.
Pick the Cubs. You're a Cubby fan?
I am a Cubs fan, yes. So
Yeah, well, tough luck.
See,
The
that's
GOAT's
why I'm
still
so
there.
patient with Ryan Tannehill, because I'm a Cubs fan.
You've been waiting for what, 100
I'm
years?
very patient.
What have you been waiting for? 100 years now?
Much longer than I've been on the alive. So
It's all because of Bartman, right? You hate that guy.
exactly.
Oh yeah, Bartman.
The headset Bartman. You know he's a writer for ESPN.com.
Oh no, I
Bartman?
didn't know that.
Are you
Yes, he
serious?
has-
You're
he
serious?
I'm serious. He has been for years. Now, guess they felt bad for him.
How does he not have death threats from Cubs fans every year? Like I saw a tweet earlier today from Dontrell Willis. Like, I wish I had a nickel for every time somebody asked me if I knew where Bartman was.
I've seen him on. I've seen him on
30 for 30
ESPN.
on him or something?
Yeah, well, they're not. He's not hiding. I've seen him on ESPN a couple of times over the past few years. Talking about. I don't even remember what he was writing for. I guess baseball. I don't even know. I don't even remember. Sure is in the Cubs, I'm sure. Poor guy. I feel bad for him.
I don't. The Marlins won.
I know, but I felt even more bad for him because we got the benefit of it, or the Marlins got the benefit of it, and he took the abuse. Poor guy.
Well, let's be honest. If he hadn't done what he'd done, maybe the Cubs would have won.
It was just maybe it was just like some kind of just instinct, reflex. He just wasn't thinking. I'm sure if he could have thought about it ahead of time, he would have done it.
If a ball's flying towards you, you got it like, oh my God, I gotta get it. And then it's like, oh crap, what did I just done?
Whoops.
I done bleeped up.
Yeah, exactly. Oh well, got to be famous for something, I guess.
That's infamous. Okay. So we've talked about Batman versus Superman very briefly, and Matt, just don't pick any Marlins, and you should be fine with your fantasy baseball. That's going to be it for this evening. I want to thank you all for joining us on this week's show, and as always, I'll see you all next week for another edition of the PhinManiacs.com podcast. Good night.